Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. So you've saved up some money, started scouring the classified ads, and decided it's time to buy your first classic Mustang. First, let me say welcome. The Mustang hobby is a lot of fun. You'll meet some great people along the way, and it's definitely a really enjoyable pastime. Now, if you've never bought a classic Mustang before, there are definitely some things you want to look out for and be aware of. So what we're going to do today is give you the basics on how to buy your first classic Mustang. Before we get into specific Mustangs, the first thing you need to do is figure out a budget. Figure out what you have to spend on the car, but also figure out what you have to spend in the future on it as well to definitely decide what is going to be the right thing for you. You also need to manage your expectations. If you are looking for a GT Fastback K-Code, no, it's going to cost a lot more money, and if you're buying a project, it will take a lot of time to get on the road. You're not going to restore a car in a couple weeks, so you have to understand that as well. If you're planning on doing a project, also when it comes to budgets, whatever you have in mind, probably want to double it. These cars are costing a lot more than you think they will. Now, when it comes to Mustangs, we're going to focus on the classic Mustangs. And by classic, I'm talking about the 64.5 through 73 Mustang. There's basically 4 different areas you're going to look at there. You have your 64 through 66 cars, your 67.8, your 69.70, and finally your 71 through 73. Also, depending on budget, it's going to determine what car you're kind of looking at. Some of the later model ones can be a little bit more affordable, but again, depending on the body style. As a general rule, the coupe is going to be your least expensive car to get into, and then the convertible and fastback kind of go back and forth depending on the options, with the fastback usually being the most expensive. Now, once you pick out the year and the body style that you're looking for, then you're going to start looking at what options were available on that car. As a general rule, the more highly optioned the car is, the more valuable it's going to be. For the 65 Mustang, for example, you have options from the engine ranging from a 6-cylinder engine all the way up to a 271 horsepower K-Code V8. There's going to be several options in between as well, but again, the more options, the better. In the case of our car, we have pony interior, we have disc brakes, we have power steering, we have a console. These are all desirable options on the early cars. When it comes to rating the condition of a classic car, there's going to be a rating scale to go by. Now, that scale, there's a couple different versions, but basically it goes through 1 through 5. Your number 1 car is going to be your top of the line, beautifully restored, perfect show car. Dropping down the list, your number 2 car is what's considered like a fine condition car, something that would win a regional show, but maybe not like national champion kind of level. Going down to 3 is going to be your high quality driver. Cars that look great, really solid condition, really enjoyable, but a little rough in certain parts around the edges. Dropping down to your number 4, again, 4 can be a driver, but a car that needs issues. Needs some mechanical upgrades, needs some interior upgrades, needs some condition upgrades. And then your number 5 cars are your ones that need restoration. These are the cars that most likely don't run, or if they do, they run poorly and need sheet metal, paint, interior, pretty much everything done to them. Now, you got to be careful there between a number 5 car and a parts car. You want to make sure you don't want to start with a parts car. Parts cars are ones with no title, no VIN, usually missing lots of panels. If you look at a car and can't see any salvageable part of that car for a restoration, it's a parts car, and let it be that. Unless it's a really rare car, which is a whole different subject. For the most part, any parts car you're going to find these days, you're not going to find a Cobra Jet or a GT350. It's going to be a base model car. And again, leave those for parts. Now, what we're going to focus on condition-wise is going to be the middle of the road. Your quality car that is a decent car, that's a driver but may need some work, they're the cars we figure most people are going to be shopping for. Now, if you can afford the top-of-the-line, really restored car, by all means, go for it. And if you're looking at one of those full project cars, then you probably have a good idea what you're looking at anyway. So we're going to focus on what to look for if you're looking to buy a nice driver-conditioned Mustang like our 65 Mustang convertible. Now, when it comes to the condition of the car, we're going to start with the exterior. When it comes to restoring these kind of cars, the most expensive thing you're going to spend money on is going to be rust repair, chassis bodywork, and paint. Those are your big expenditures. So depending on your budget, you want to start by looking at the outside condition of the car. You want to look at the body panels for rust spots. You want to look at signs for repair. You want to bring a magnet with you if possible to check to see if there's Bondo in it. And if the car looks decent overall, you want to look at the paint condition on the car as well. Now, in the case of our 65 convertible, this car has a lacquer paint job, which unfortunately is probably one of the hardest paint jobs to repair. Lacquer was used popular in the 80s. It's still used today by some paint shops, but it's a usually cheaper way to paint the car where it looks great and shines, but over time it's going to crack and chip and makes it very hard to strip and paint. Now, again, this car has a lacquer finish, which looks good, but if you're looking at a car like this and you're planning on repainting it, that's a cost you definitely want to take into consideration. Most of your classic Mustangs, a lot of them will be a single stage. If they were painted recently, they'll be your standard base clear, which is much easier to work with. Again, like I said, something you want to look at if you're planning on repainting the car, making sure you're not going to spend too much to strip the existing paint off. When it comes to the body of the car, common rust areas are going to be the bottom edges of the doors, the wheel wells like inside the fenders, and the quarter panel itself. As you can see on our 65, we're starting to get some bubbling here under the paint, which is definitely a sign of some rust under there. And what you also want to do when you're looking here, small amounts of rust can definitely be repaired, but you want to take that into consideration when you're looking at the price of the car. But if you see bubbles, or even if you don't, it's a good idea to bring a magnet with you when you look at the car. If there's been poor repair work done in here, usually use a plastic filler and the magnet won't stick to it. So grab a magnet, put some body shop tape on it, and work your way around, just making sure the magnet sticks. And anywhere on the car you look at where the body may not look quite right, put the magnet on it and take a look, make sure it's not full of filler. In our case, this is definitely metal all the way through. Now that we've talked about the body and chassis, the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be the mechanicals. This will be the next most expensive thing to fix when it comes to your classic Mustang. Now here, if you have the ability to take the car to a shop, to have them do a compression test, stuff like that, it's great, but more than likely that's not going to happen. So what you want to do here is just see how well the car runs. Start it up cold, see how long it takes to catch an idle, see how smooth the idle is, and then you want to look under the hood and see what's been done. In the case of our car, we can tell it's got new hoses on it, it's got a newer radiator on it, it's got a new ignition, there's a Petronic, but some of the stuff is older as well. But here, just look for leaks. Look for major coolant leaks, look for major oil leaks, just see what everything looks like, and do the same thing under the car. Check to see if the pan's leaking, check to see if the rear main seal is leaking into the transmission, see how many leaks the car has. Now keep in mind, we're talking about 50-year-old cars here. Small leaks are normal on a driver quality car. You want to avoid major repair, and a major leak can be a sign of something pretty major that has to be repaired. Now we're moving on to the interior of the car. Now the interior is probably the least expensive part of the car to replace, with one exception, which I'll get to in a couple minutes. But as far as the interior goes, this is a great place for someone who's like a first-time installer to kind of get their feet wet and get a feel for how things go. Replacing the carpet's not terribly difficult. The dash pad's easy to do. Trim, door panels, really not hard to replace at all. Even the upholstery, if you watch our videos, you can probably get through it. It's not that bad to do. The most expensive part to replace in the interior, which unfortunately we can't show with our convertible though, is the headliner. If you're looking at a coupe or a fastback, the headliner is all torn up. The headliner is expensive to do, and if you do it yourself, it's very, very time consuming, because to do it properly, you have to remove all the glass from the car, and it is, figure a minimum of $1,000 roughly labor to have somebody do a headliner for you, something to take into consideration when looking at the interior of the car. But besides that, the interior is a great place, like again, for a first-time installer to do a couple things, fix the car up, and make it feel like their own. Now I mentioned the cost of doing a headliner on a coupe or a fastback. On a convertible, you don't have a headliner, but you have something almost as expensive to replace, and that's going to be the convertible top. If you're looking at a convertible, you want to make sure the top moves up and down freely and works like it should. As far as the material on the top, many times you're going to find convertible tops are damaged, have some small holes in them, and they have to be replaced. Along the lines of what a headliner is going to cost, you're looking at $1,000 just probably for a convertible top and labor, so again, keep this in mind when pricing out a car. Another thing to keep in mind is that the classic cars did not have modern stereos that we're used to today. So a lot of times these cars have been modified to add aftermarket audio equipment. Some place you want to look at is the dash where the factory radio would be. If it is cut out for an aftermarket radio, make sure it's done cleanly if you don't mind using that kind of stereo. If you want to put it back to original, that can also be expensive to do, as you have to weld in a panel to replace it. Same thing for the doors. A lot of times people do add aftermarket speakers. If you don't mind the speakers being there and they're done cleanly, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you want it to look original, again, it can be costly to repair. Now, speaking of options, when it comes to options on a car, rarity usually means value. A rare paint color, for example, is usually more desirable than a standard paint color. The most rare options that are the most valuable are the horsepower. And by that, I mean the bigger engines. And for 65 through 66, your K code will be your most desirable standard Mustang because it had the highest horsepower engine. And that is pretty much the same all the way through 73. Now we mentioned the engine and mechanicals, but we also want to talk about other things, the braking system, the transmission, the rear. As far as the transmission, again, you're going to have two options, either your automatic or your stick shift. You want to make sure if it's an automatic, it changes gears smoothly, and the same thing with the stick. Make sure the clutch works, make sure it feels fluid, there's not a lot of bindings. It's all things that may have to be replaced in the future. As far as the brake goes, again, drive the car, see how the brakes feel. Many times you're going to have a manual brake. Some of these cars will have power brakes, but make sure they operate like they're supposed to. Again, if it pulls badly to one side, if the brakes are very, very squishy or very, very soft, These are all things you have to consider and cost of restoring the car. Now, underneath the car, chances are you won't be able to get it up on a lift like we did here, but you can still look at these areas and check for damage. What you want to check on a Mustang especially is the floors. Everybody knows Mustangs are very common for floor rust. So check the floor area. If the car is equipped, check the torque boxes. These are, again, very common rust areas, along with the rocker section on the convertibles. You can check this very easily. Simply lay on the ground, get a flashlight, and look under, and then check out the section here. Now, once you've looked at the floor pans, now move on to the frame rails. The Mustang is a unibody car, so you can have frame rails front and back connected by the floor and the rocker area. So this is your floor support, and this is your frame rail here that goes all the way to the front of the car. Check this for rust. These are very expensive to replace. You can check your shock tower area, check where your hardware mounts. Definitely look at this whole section here, and again, look for leaks too. Check your power steering components. Look at all these things before you make a decision to purchase a car. Now, when it comes to the frame rail, this front section here, it's very common for water to get up in here and rust. You can see ours is in very good shape. If you do have rust here, though, you don't have to replace the whole rail. There are partials to fix that, so it's not a big deal. But again, look at other things under the car. We can see, yeah, our sway bar bushing is shot. Those are cheap. No big deal. Those kind of things don't even worry yourself about. Make sure the structure of the car, the bones of the car, are in good shape. Underneath the rear of the car, same thing. Look at the gas tank, look at the exhaust system, but make sure, again, the structure is sound. Check your frame rails, check your floor drop-offs. These are all really common areas to rust on these cars, so you want to make sure that they're in good shape as well. Again, focus on the big pieces first. Make sure the frame rails are solid. Make sure the front torque boxes are solid. Then worry about the smaller stuff like the drop-offs, which are cheaper to replace. Now, because of the winters and salt on the road, a lot of times your East Coast cars are going to be in a lot worse shape than your West Coast cars. In our case, this is a West Coast car that is relatively rust-free underneath, but even we have a rust spot, as you can see right here. At some point in time, there was probably a leak inside. The water sat here, made for a soft floor panel that'll have to be repaired. Now, again, here, these can be patched. There are partials available. The whole thing would not have to be replaced. Now, after checking out the floors and the underside, the next most common area for Mustangs is going to be in the cowl area of these classic cars. The reason being is water can get in here and there's drains, but if those drains get clogged by grass, leaves, anything happens to get up in there, the water is going to sit. Water sitting on metal is going to lead to rust. And here it doesn't matter where the car is. It could be an East Coast rusty climate, a West Coast climate. It doesn't matter. If those get blocked, it can lead to rust. One of the issues with the cowl, it's actually very, very hard to tell how badly rusted it is. Now, under the car, you can sort of see the side panels, but the main rust occurs underneath. The only way really to look at is get up under the dash with a flashlight and look at the area and see if there's any holes. And to check the cowl, what you want to get is a bright flashlight, and you literally just have to get up under the dash. You want to look right where the heater box is here, and where the vent connects, you'll see metal up in there. You want to check both sides. Make sure it's rust-free. Now, we covered a lot of information in this video, but obviously there's even more to it when making a large purchase like this. I suggest picking up one of the books on our website that allow you to decode the door tag and VIN tag to make sure everything on the car is what the owner says it is. Also, if there's been work done previously, ask for receipts. Make sure the work was done professionally and make sure everything is what they say it is. As far as that, spend some time, do some research, make sure you get the right Mustang for you.